I'm delighted to introduce Doctors Feldman and Case from the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and they will be talking about the BWH Health Equity Curriculum and the rotating resident program for underrepresented medicine trainees. So with that, I will turn it over to Candace. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having us. So I'm going to get the presentation started and then turn things over to Candace, but we're excited to be here. So there's a whole team that's been helping with this project. Myself and Dr. Feldman are the co-PIs. Carly Forrester has helped us a lot with the project coordination support. Dr. Simon Helfgott, who's the fellowship director for Brigham, Dr. Alan Landry, who's the HMS director of Health Equity Education, and finally, Dr. Valerie Stone, who is the vice chair of DEI at the Brigham. So the goal of this program was to create a pipeline initiative to expose internal medicine residents who identify as URiM to rheumatology through a multifaceted rotation at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And the rationale is sort of three main points. One is focusing on individuals who are already drawn to internal medicine in hopes of increasing the number of people who would eventually be more committed to rheumatology. The second was aiming to showcase rheumatology to individuals who are training in programs who don't have formal exposure or who don't have formal rheumatology fellowship programs. And the third was to provide both real-time active teaching and engagement, as well as longer-term reading materials and opportunity for longitudinal mentorship. So to talk a bit about the process of this, so we developed an application that included several questions regarding interest in rheumatology and general career goals. We did require a letter of good standing from the residency director to make sure that there was buy-in to support the residents in coming for their rotation. We sent the application to residency directors across the state of Massachusetts, again, focusing on programs that did not have rheumatology fellowships with personalized notes. And then we offered anywhere from a 2 to 4 week rotation. For the number of applications, so we received 8. We reviewed them together as a group and accepted 3 individuals who identify as URiM who are from Massachusetts-based internal medicine residency programs. One resident came for a 2-week rotation, one for a 3-week, and one for a 4-week. The first 2 residents have just completed their rotations today, and the 3rd resident will come join us next month. And in addition to rheumatology, we asked about their other interests, and which included primary care, health equity, teaching and education, clinical and basic science research, and nephrology. So the components of the program, we'll go into more detail for these on the subsequent slides, but to give a broad overview, so there's the clinical rotation, there was a simulation experience, rheumatology educational conferences, which were mostly focused on adult rheumatology, but a little bit on pediatric, and a final presentation that the residents gave, a health equity curriculum, mentoring meetings, including meetings with the current fellows over lunch and coffee, and longitudinal mentoring experience, and finally evaluations. So looking at the clinical rotation curriculum, so part of this was inpatient, focused on the consult service, which was with the fellows and the consult attending. We also arranged for outpatient clinic with focusing on master clinicians who are very experienced, not only in their rheumatology practice, but also in teaching the residents and fellows. We had a session specifically in the first week of their rotation looking at the physical exam and history taking specific to rheumatology. And then we had rotations through many of these subspecialty rheumatology clinics that are found at the Brigham. So folks who focus on lupus. There's a Center for Adults with Pediatric Rheumatic Illness, or the Capri Clinic, that is run by people with med-peds training. And then also combinations with other subspecialties, including dermatology, neurology, cardiology, pulmonary disease, so ILD, and oncology. The Simulation Center had a arthrocentesis training session, so we did shoulder and knee arthrocentesis training. And then we had them participate in multiple different lectures, so the rheumatology grand rounds, patient care rounds, consult rounds, internal medicine grand rounds, and also pediatric rheumatology grand rounds. And finally, at one of those conferences, they did do a case presentation talking about some of the patients that they had encountered on the rotation. All right, I'll turn it over to Dr. Feldman.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the sort of other piece of this rotation, which included the incorporation of the health equity curriculum. The idea behind this was not only to create a curriculum for these specific residents who are rotating with us, but more broadly to have a curriculum also available for other med students, other residents who rotate with us going forward, and also for the faculty within our division, as well as our current fellows. So, just to give you a sort of snapshot of what we introduced these residents to when they rotated with us and one who's about to come, is when they first started on the first day or two when they came, they met with me and we had a sort of introductory conversation about like an equity framework and thinking about rheumatology through a health equity lens. And we gave all of our residents, all three of our residents, or we'll be giving the third, two books. The first book is So We Want to Talk About Race. And the reason we chose this book is because this is actually a book that our entire rheumatology division received and read and had a journal club on. And it's also a book that our hospital used over the past few years to have faculty-based journal clubs as well. No book is perfect, but I think that it was a book that many of our faculty have been exposed to, and so we felt that it was an important thing for our residents to read as well. And the other book we gave was Epidemiology and the People's Health, Theory and Context by Dr. Nancy Krieger. Nancy Krieger is one of the, if not the world's expert in social epidemiology. And the idea here is to really provide sort of a general broad framework about how one can think about the origin of disease and epidemiology in general through a health equity lens. The other thing that I think we uniquely were able to provide is that we actually have a team here through another grant mechanism that has set up a systematic screening process for all rheumatology patients across Mass General Brigham who have any kind of systemic inflammatory arthritis or rheumatic condition to screen for social determinants and then intervene on those needs that we uncover. So part of what we wanted our rotating students to be exposed to was actually seeing what the day-to-day of that team was. So they met with our community resource specialist, with our nurse navigator, with our main research assistant, with our analyst who does geocoding maps to really get a sense of the sort of other side of the care that we provide to our patients from an equity lens. In the spirit of also wanting to make sure that in 2 to 4 weeks, our rotating residents had a full clinical experience, most of the other parts of this were asynchronous. So we created a shared Dropbox folder that included a number of recorded lectures that we recently gave or had outside speakers give to our rheumatology division, including one on climate change, one on understanding structural racism, disparities on RA care and research, and social determinants of health and rheumatic conditions that they could watch at any point. We also have a series of curated journal articles in rheumatology on relevant topics, including race-based practices in rheumatology, social determinants, unconscious bias, and then interventions to begin to address disparities. And we also, our group has also connected and worked with a number of Massachusetts-based health equity advocacy organizations. And so we also provided the websites and some information in case they wanted to get involved in that aspect of equity work as well. And then, in part because we weren't sure exactly when our rotating residents were going to come, we had a priori set up a bunch of synchronous lectures. And depending on when these residents are rotating with us, they'll get one or more of these lectures as well. So we have an expert nurse and researcher coming in a couple of weeks to give a talk to our entire division on providing trauma-informed care. We have 2 wonderful dermatologists giving a talk on the Skin of Color Clinic. And the 2 residents who rotated with us had the opportunity to attend medicine grand rounds, which was hospital-wide, entitled Rough Sleepers, and it was with Tracy Kidder and Dr. Jim O'Connell, which was a really cool experience, I think, for everyone who attended. Next slide, please. So the other piece to mention to this rotation was a mentorship component. And part of this was really trying to not only allow the rotating residents to meet with, to work clinically with a bunch of our faculty members, but also to have the opportunity to have sort of outside of clinic conversations with our faculty, both within and outside of rheumatology, so that they could also establish longitudinal relationships, and also so they could get a sense of this kind of scope of work that rheumatologists do, whether it includes includes education or research in clinical work. So one of the first meetings they had was with Dr. Sparks, who's our associate program director, and he's also a expert in sort of thinking about mentorship in general. So he had a conversation with them about how to make the most of their mentoring opportunities, and he gave them each a talk that he's developed on this. We also asked rotating residents to identify rheumatologists they would like to meet with based on interest, and then we also took their interest and identified some additional individuals. And these meetings were scattered throughout their rotation, so that they could have an opportunity to really meet with people beyond those people who they rotated with. In addition, all of our residents met with Dr. Valerie Stone, who's the vice chair of DEI for the Department of Medicine, with Dr. Helfgott, with Dr. Grabelis, who's the chief of our division, and with Dr. Estevern, who directs URiM fellowship initiatives for the Department of Medicine. And at the end of the rotation, we ask our residents to identify one or two individuals who they want to continue their relationship with after the end of this rotation. So the last piece are evaluation. So one of the first things we did when they started on their first day was we gave them a baseline evaluation to give us a sense of their kind of baseline knowledge, particularly around equity related topics and also their interests around the rotation. The end of the rotation actually included some of the same equity related questions to see whether or not there was a change in knowledge from baseline to follow-up, and then just general feedback about the rotation. We also gave the consult attendings they work with evaluation questionnaires, and we have exit interviews with each of the residents on their last day. So today, actually this morning, I met with two of our residents who are just finishing the rotation today. We got really helpful feedback. I think one of the things that both of them highlighted was how wonderful it was to kind of have the opportunity to work with many different people and meet with many different people to really get a big, broad sense of the scope of the field, to be able to see both the rheumatology subspecialty clinics like rheumatology, cardiology, rheumatology, dermatology, which I think are unique to, in some ways, to our program and our hospital here. And the other thing that I learned is that, with the scope of things that we gave them, many of them to the two residents haven't had a chance to really delve into the Dropbox. So we're going to extend the invitation to their non-Brigham email address so they can delve a little bit more into that at the end of the rotation. And the other thing that I will note that I also thought was really wonderful that I was able to share with both of the residents was the feedback we've actually gotten so far from our faculty, which has been really spectacular. Just to give you a couple of quotes, about one of our rotating residents, she was awesome. She had outstanding rapport. I hope she becomes a rheumatologist. She was wonderful. She was super engaged, excellent assessments and presentations. And about our other resident, the questions were well informed. They were thoughtful. They showed critical thinking, an extremely nice person, engaged and interested. So I think that, on our end, from the faculty side, it's been really enriching and wonderful having these residents, and we received similar feedback from them. So we hope to be able to continue this program as well. And then we also hope to engage with these individuals going forward with yearly surveys. So I don't know if I have time to go through this, but I did just want to highlight a couple of obstacles that we encountered just to, share it with the group and also so that to show what we're thinking about also going forward. I think that that I can speak for myself and say that I underestimated the amount of administrative support that's needed to put on a rotation like this. We actually lucked out and benefited from a cognitive load reduction initiative through the Department of Surgery, which actually lent us the support of an exceptional administrative leader, Carly Forrester, who helped with all of the credentialing of these residents, all of the meetings scheduled, and actually had experience setting up away rotations for residents or visiting rotations for residents before, and was a incredibly valuable addition. But I think going forward, making sure we budget for this kind of support, I think, is a very important thing that we learned about. We also learned that it is oftentimes hard for residents to have 2 to 4 weeks of protected time without having to do backup coverage, but we were able to kind of work around that. And, I think the other piece is that it is, we really wanted to showcase everything to these residents in a short period of time. And being able to balance the sort of breadth with depth and the goal of cultivating relationships that could have longitudinal potential, in addition to showcasing all the things we think are wonderful about our hospital and our field, was definitely challenging. And then the other thing that I will say is that we actually focused this only on residents in Massachusetts who didn't have rheumatology programs within their hospital, because we wanted to make sure that this was feasible within the 1-year grant, in enabling us to have people who already had limited licenses and malpractice coverage so that they could hit the ground running and also be able to be fully integrated members of our team, writing clinical notes, etc. It does seem like this is surmountable to do outside of Massachusetts for people credentialed outside of Massachusetts, but it will take some time and some support. So this is a future direction for us. So thanks for the ability to do this work, and it was great presenting to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you both for the great presentation. I know we're going to continue the discussion during the panel, but you answered already a lot of the questions that I would have asked. So just in terms of commenting a little bit between the different lengths of the options, you said 2, 3, or 4 weeks. It's clear that it was based on people's availability and preference, but do you know, or you think after this last one is done, you would have a good sense of what might be best? Because it sounds like a lot of material to cover in a 2-week period, but maybe it's hard to get everybody to have a 4-week opening. So if you have any comments, I mean, you already, I think that the last slide where you talked about some of the challenges is going to be very valuable for others that might be considering a similar program, but anything from practical standpoint that you want to share for anyone else who is interested in developing such a program, it would be great to have some of those discussions maybe during the panel, if that's okay.